Hello, good evening. And when I say we, I mean on behalf of Courier, are so glad that all of you could be here tonight. Out of all of the holiday parties in the city, and even the ones in this building, you chose this one. So thank you. You will not be disappointed. Yeah, you can give yourself a little cheer for that. Yeah. What we're doing here tonight is showcasing and highlighting some of what we attempt to exemplify in our reporting at Courier. Courage over cowardice. Now more than ever, it's important to exhibit courage, to know what that means, to amplify people who are courageous, whether in small ways or in ways that impact us as a country. We will be having a few panels, discussing a few things, very, very interesting stuff. So if you're not on the edge of your seat yet, you will be. The first one I will be moderating. It's movement building for this moment. It's a conversation on the importance of grassroots opposition, advocacy-led movements, and innovative ways of meeting the needs of our communities in challenging times, and to meet the political and cultural moment we collectively face today. That's a long way of saying there's a lot of shit going down right now. You're probably enmeshed in it, and it's a good way to find out who is leading these moments and what we can learn from them. And so now I'll bring up our lovely panelists. First, we have Melissa Morales, the founder of Somos Votantes. In 2024, she led over $50 million worth of Latino civic engagement and political investments across the country. Her previous roles are research director for Equus Research and the executive director of SEIU in Florida. Woo! Going down the line, we have Nourbese Flint. She's the president of All Above All, a national organization advancing abortion justice and expanding access to reproductive care through policy, culture change, and movement building. She was formerly with Planned Parenthood Senior Director of Black Leadership and Engagement, and she brings deep expertise on the realities women face today and the liberated future that she is fighting for. All right, and this to her right is Rashad Robinson. He's a social justice leader leading social change as a strategist at Color of Change, where he worked for 13 years. Previously, he guided advocacy at GLAD and served as co-chair of the Aspen Institute's Commission on Information Disorder. And now to my left, we have Yasmin Radjy, executive director of Swing Left and Vote Forward. She brings to this panel and to all of our lives 15 years of experience in organizing, advocacy, and elections. She served as the executive director of Swing Left and its nonpartisan affiliate, Vote Forward, since 2022. Following leadership roles, including senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Treasury in the Biden-Harris administration, not the current one, and national political director and organizing director at Planned Parenthood Action Fund, and Virginia State Director at Mobilize. And just so we round things out, in case you're wondering who I am and what I'm doing here, you are not alone. My name is Cameron Stevenson. I was a founding editor of the Copper Courier, Courier's local newsroom in Arizona, where I worked for 6 years. And now I'm the national correspondent for Courier, our national brand, where we lead the internet. And nobody can dispute that. We have millions of followers across several platforms. We strive to activate change and activism, giving people resources, turning hopeless news into something of service so they can use that in their daily lives. So, please hold your applause. Thank you, that's so unexpected. I want to talk a little bit about information, or lack thereof, or the bad kind of information, which is misinformation. We are in the midst of an information war with misinfo and disinfo. How can we leverage new media and traditional organizing together to win that war? Or is that something that we're even capable of doing?
I think this is really an important question because it actually is kind of like we have to actually be engaged in the new media space. We know that like 48% of people actually don't even watch the news anymore. They get their information from their friends, their family, and social media. And so if we are not actually engaging in those conversations online, we are actually missing a whole like just gigantic group of audience that we need to be talking to. And so I think the question is not if, it's how and when and how much, because where we are also and where we also are seeing people at is a lot in the culture space. And the culture space is where folks are organizing folks into the political space. And so I think we need to figure out how to offer an alternative vision, an alternative future, an alternative information, good information in the spaces where people are looking for that. So we're able to bring folks into our space and have on-ramps around like, I was thinking about healthcare, or I was thinking about childcare, something that I'm a mom of a 5-year-old or 4-year-old. He tells people that he's 5, and now I'm saying it.
Misinformation.
Yes. right there. But like my feed is full of all these algorithms of stuff, and like it's a perfect way to just like get me in. And how are we engaging moms who are 4-year-olds around the information that they need to then pull them into conversations around both around this stuff that they need to know. So yeah, this is so core to like what we need to be doing.
I couldn't agree more. And but I think we have to do two things simultaneously as progressives. First, we do have to do exactly what you're talking about. We have to be able to have sort of the infrastructure that can reach people at scale. What Courier is doing is so incredibly important, and the other sort of organizations that are being built across our ecosystem to kind of deal with the last war that we lost. We don't have a network of right-wing radio stations. We don't have 24-hour news stations, but so much is changing in terms of how people are reached. And so we do have to think about what does it mean to reach people and move people to action. So it has to be a behavior mindset, right? The church doesn't care if you read the Bible, if you don't show up to the church, if you don't tithe, if you don't engage. And so we have to think about our media engagement as sort of behavior, and the metrics that we judge whether or not we win is, do people take action? Do people feel more connected to us? Are people willing to sing our songs, show up to our rallies, engage with us in ways that are powerful? And that has to be sort of one of the really key metrics about whether or not we're successful with any of these metrics. But we can't mistake our presence on these platforms for power. It is not a mistake that we're being beat. There's an infrastructure of profiteering that happens across this media ecosystem that is stacked against us. And so just like our work to turn people out every election cycle inside of a system that we know is not designed for us to truly maximize and support everyone's ability to express their will for a better future through the vote, we have to recognize that the rules are stacked against us. So we also have to change the rules, because power is not simply about how loud we are or about how much we can get on these platforms. It is our ability to change the rules. And so when we do actually have power, it does mean that we have to actually make sure that there are rules and accountability for these platforms, because it's not a mistake that Facebook and X and all of these platforms have such an outsized role in whether or not people actually get the information they need. But also, the whole incentive structure of these platforms is profiteering off of racism, off of misogyny, off of actually dividing us. They get more money when we're on there and we're fighting and we're not sort of coming together. And that is by design, it's not an accident. And so inequality is not an accident. Racism and misogyny for profit is not an accident. It is manufactured. There are people behind it. And part of our work is not just trying to win on these platforms, but actually changing the structures of how they operate, the rules of the road. So it is about how do we get more share on these platforms, but it's also about how do we change the rules so that more of us actually have a voice and they actually work for us long term.
One thing I would say about misinformation and disinformation is I think in the previous few years, as we've thought about how we're organizing around and against misinformation and disinformation, how we're combating misinformation and disinformation, a lot of what we prepared for was how to fight against people believing things that are not true, believing misinformation, believing disinformation. I don't think we fully prepared for the fact that in a time where platforms are flooded with misinformation and disinformation, there's not just the danger that people believe it, but what we are starting to see, and what I think is even more dangerous, is that people do not believe anything. They do not believe anything they are seeing online. And when that is the case, how do you message then on a platform? So I think we have to be engaging in these spaces, and there has to be, where we have been incredibly successful, I think, in a sort of a new path forward, is in how we are using media spaces to prime the field for people to then push them to more in-person, offline engagement, where they can have conversations one-on-one with other people. It just helps to believe something when you can look it in the eyes.
Strong agreements with my fellow panelists. I think the first way that I'd answer your question is to combat misinformation, disinformation, we have to build trust. And I think trust can't just be built online. We have to build trust online, but there has to be some coherence between the online and offline work. And I think that whether at the organizational level, at the sort of elected official level, there is the online vertical and the offline vertical, and they don't cohere. And both are talking at rather than sort of absorbing what people are saying, how they're feeling. And I think, to Nourbese's point on sort of like the mom organizing, I get wild misinformation, disinformation online, also as a mom of a 4-year-old who lies and says he's 3. But I think what right-wing influencers do is listen. And they're listening in their congregations, they're listening offline, then they're talking about it online, and then it coheres when they then go and knock on a door. And I think for me, the sort of, we're at Swing Left, we're engaging in a big deep canvassing program right now that we hope is connecting the dots between online and offline. And so what does that look like is, we went out and knocked on a door in a competitive congressional district. We knocked on many doors, but I'm talking about one. We knocked on someone's door. That person said, I voted for Joe Biden because of the economy. He didn't do a damn thing for me. So I voted for Trump because of the economy. He's not doing a damn thing for me. Both parties suck. The system is broken. And then when the canvasser started talking about, the fight for the House, this is in a frontline House Democratic district, the voter said, well, I'm not going to vote for the incumbent because that Democrat is just like Trump and voted for the big, beautiful bill. And the canvasser is like, well, that's not true. That's misinformation and disinformation that you saw online. And the voter's like, nope, that's true. And they, it's sort of like how many back and forth, no, yes, no, yes. And so I think the project before us is not like, how do we get to the yes in that one conversation? It is, how do we rebuild trust with that voter who really believes that the system is broken, who doesn't have the imagination for it being any better, and that's not their job. They probably have 2 jobs, and they probably have many kids, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And so, how do we, in that conversation, what does it look like if then the follow-up is not, Democrats have a 5-point plan to make you trust us, but rather follow up on, what is that person struggling with? What did they say? When they go online, let's talk about those things that they said online as well, and then follow up on their specifics individually and in aggregate. And I think so much of the way that we talk is sort of like so focus group to death that it is obvious that we're not listening, but it's incoherent because what they see online and then what the canvasser's saying on the door and then what they get in the mail are all things that feel completely incongruent from their lives.
One of the ways that honestly people in power and the far right benefit from that is because the easiest thing to do when you're given 6 different realities is to tune out from all of it completely. And low voter turnout, low involvement, low engagement, that is where the wealthy really get their power from. It's much more difficult to build a movement based on fighting for something. It's easy to say, hey, this is something I don't like, you should be against it, and tune out. But Nourbese, I wanted to ask you, because I feel like this touches on some of the work you've been doing. Because movement building is about going for something, not just against something, what does it mean to imagine a better world and fight for it today when it feels like people are barely even able to hang on?
Yeah, so I'm going to enter this conversation and that question in 2 ways. I am a big sci-fi fan, and it guides my life.
Good start.
Yes, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about Star Trek and a little bit about Batman. This is cosmic. So there's this, if anybody has watched The Dark Knight, the second one with Bane. Dark Returns, I think it is. It's a good movie. There's this moment where Bruce, aka Batman, is in this well. I know, right? Spoiler. And he's in this prison and he needs to get out. And they have this rope and they're like, oh, you should go out, you should go out, you should go out, right? And he keeps trying to jump for this final step and keeps missing it. And they're like, you need to let go of the rope, right? So he goes, he jumps, he gets in, he does no rope, and he jumps, and he makes it out. And I think of that as the work. If we keep holding on to what we have been, we're not gonna get out.
Yep.
We are actually need to let go of the rope in order for us to get to this new space. And then when I think about it in the Star Trek space, I think about it in kind of this where I think there's this kind of idea like, oh, if we do something, we'll get back to the world that was. That is no longer existing. There are two worlds that are coming for us, right? One that is dark, that we are seeing right now, and then there's an alternative vision. And we need to be able to tell people and articulate why this better future is for all of us. I have been able to use and see Star Trek as my North Star because it showed a world that we solved all of the isms, but all of us was there, right? We didn't get rid of people, right? We had all the things. There was somebody who was disabled to be able to be the chief engineer, right? We changed technology to meet us at humanity. And that's what we need to offer folks. And if we don't have that, and if, we don't have that, we are going to get stuck and go back into this alternative or go forward into this alternative world that is dark and sad and mean and cruel. And that is not the place that I want to be, right? And so I think it's actually really beholden on all of us to actually start making and building the alternative view, because that is what people are asking for. People are searching for something, right? That is how you have people vote for Trump and AOC in the same piece. They are searching for something different, and we need to offer that. That is the core of the work that needs to move forward.
Now, for every Batman, there's a Bane. And for every Kirk, there's a Khan. And what we're looking at as we move forward is courage, people of courage, profiles of courage versus profiles in cowardice. Those who are able to stand up and give a fight versus those who rely on fear, who rely on rage, who rely on the worst instincts that we have. What would some of you consider profiles in courage that you've either seen in your work or in your lives versus maybe some profiles in cowardice?
I'm going to continue with the Batman analogy. I don't know if it's a profile in cowardice or the Joker, but one of my favorite comic book villains of this election cycle is Congressman Rob Bresnahan in Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District. I had the joy of knocking on doors there just a couple of weekends ago in the beautiful Poconos Mountains. And I focus on him, first of all, because I think going back to something I mentioned earlier of voters really feel like the system is broken. I think he knew that when he ran a really competitive election cycle. And he said, my focus is going to be fighting corruption, starting with banning stock trading. Guess who one of the top stock traders in the Congress is? Congressman Rob Bresnahan, and in true comic book villain status, has used his winnings to buy a helicopter. I mean, it's just like the story just writes itself. But I say that because, going out and knocking on doors in his district, people don't know that. We're all here because we know nobody's talking. The way that we talk about that district is we say PAO8, R+4. What does that mean, right? Go out and talk to people, and people are struggling with grocery prices, they're struggling with affordability, they don't trust either party, and rather than tell the story of the comic book villain who represents them, we go PAO8, R+4, and they're like, I don't get what that is, Democrats don't make sense to me, and so the status quo and that dark alternate world order is the world that we're living in. And so I say that because it is a long list, right? It is so many, far-right extremists in moderates' clothing. We've got Mike Lawler. Mike Johnson, I don't know if he can be a profile in Cowardice because he's like too incompetent to even sort of like make the list. But it's a long list, and I think something that we need to do is tell the story better so people get it and they have a villain to imagine when they are struggling and when things feel so, sort of the hill that we need to climb together to make a better country feels so steep, they don't know sort of where to look for hope, let alone who to blame.
I think on the courage versus cowardice, I really sitting with something you were saying, which was that it is going to be our tendency to want to, in a world that feels very chaotic right now and all of the norms have been sort of torn down, it's a natural human reaction to want to rebuild what we've always known because it feels safe and it feels comfortable and it's what we remember as normal in a world that feels very unnormal right now, in a world that is very unnormal right now. But I think like there is a lot to be said for using this time to create something new that works better for people. Because what got us here is a system that has run for so long and run people into the ground for so long that the levels of discontent have left us open to con men like Trump. When I think then about courage and cowardice, I think cowardice right now is being afraid of primaries. I think in a system where there is a lot at stake, you should have to prove your seat. You should have to prove that you still have some fight in you. You should have to prove that you have the best ideas. You should have to prove that you're the one that the voters want. You should have to prove all of that, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. So I think when I'm thinking of courage and cowardice right now, everyone should get vacuum primaried, like everyone.
As a New Yorker, I really do, I think, want to uplift the kind of organizers and grassroots leaders who didn't accept the status quo. Inside of a city that there's a lot of retribution for sort of stepping out and deciding that you're going to sort of back someone early on that may not have a chance, and that you're going to advance sort of a vision about what you actually want. And in this, I think, conversation around courage versus cowardice, it is this idea of the story that we constantly tell. I really do appreciate this point about not going back to a world, but that of the past. But it is a world that actually did not work. It's not just the nostalgia; it did not work, and it did not work for so many people, and so many people opt out of participating. And sometimes when I come to DC a lot, I think we sort of know a lot more in DC. People know a lot more about the politics and what's happening, and most people have no idea what's these conversations that are sort of happened in DC about politics, about the sort of ins and outs of the issues. And most people every single day are living their lives. And even in this era where we are facing deep levels of authoritarianism, people are not necessarily paying attention at the levels that we probably want them, because far too often our side tells a story about inequality that is unfortunate rather than unjust. It tells a story that inequality sort of just happens. It's a car accident. And when we tell stories that are unfortunate rather than unjust, our side, far too often offers solutions that are charitable versus structural, right? They are like almost leaning into that there's going to be an underclass. There's going to be people who are struggling. Let's send water bottles to Jackson, Mississippi, and let's send water bottles to Flint instead of actually dealing with the pipes and dealing with why the pipes are not actually clean and the corporations and the profiteers behind it. And you will hear me talk a lot about corporations and profiteers because fundamentally our side hasn't actually gotten clear about what we believe about that and who we're willing to go up against, who we're willing actually to challenge in this kind of conversation of holding institutions accountable. And when we don't tell a full story about why certain things don't happen, about why we can't advance certain policies, about who's standing in the way, when we don't tell that full story of corporate power, the other side can easily fill it in with immigrants, with black people, with women, with trans people, with whoever is an easy part of the story. And so when we tell stories that are unfortunate rather than unjust, we set ourselves up. It's not that black people are less likely to get a loan from the bank, it's that banks are less likely to give loans to black people. And far too often we spend our time not actually calling out and being clear about who's standing in the way of the type of change, because we're hoping to get a little bit of money from that side as well. And when we can release ourselves from that, the type of change that we can invite people in to fight can be so transformative. And I think the grassroots organizers, the people in New York that were willing to actually fight for something different, challenge something different, not believe that they had to lean into a system that did not work and push for something different, are sort of the people that I want to uplift in this conversation.
So I'll only add quickly that, like, not just the folks in New York, big up to New York, but for the grassroots folks all over this country that have been doing the work with no money, with no shine, who have been every day showing up for their communities. Like, that is what courage looks like to me. That is also what community looks like to me. That is also what kindness looks like for me. These are what heroes looks like to me, right? And so those folks I want to big up. I want to big up the black women who, after so much heartbreak after the last election, got up the next day and still served their community, right? The folks that just said, all right, we don't have to come back from this, and we shook it off, and still are out there in the front lines, whether it's the folks in elected office, or we see time and time again black women standing up, to the folks, again, who are working and leading a lot of these grassroots organizations that are talking to everyday people and then trying to make sure that people's direct needs are filled, as well as the tomorrow needs. I think the last piece I would say is giving it up to the news, the independent news. Let me be very clear about that. It has been really hard to find good information, like from that last piece, right? I remember turning on the kind of traditional news and just feeling heartbroken because the stories about what is happening in people's lives were just not getting through. And where I'm seeing that conversation happen is on the Substacks, it's on YouTube, it is on places where people are talking about the maternal mortality rates, that people are talking about what is happening in other countries. People are talking about what does it mean for the economic and healthcare implications of the big, beautiful bill that is actually still, like, it passed, right? We're still gonna feel that, right? It is like not only the subsidies, but what we're seeing is, like, after the elections in 2026, they have decimated our healthcare. Those type of conversations are so needed, and we're just missing those in some of the more traditional spaces. And so I just want to give it up to that is courage, particularly in a space that you do not get rewarded. You actually get punished for speaking up for power, for being bold, for being on the frontier of the work. And so, yes, all of that, everything what everybody else said, and for the folks who don't get that shine, that is the courage.
Strong agree. I want to add on riding the train of the grassroots are the most courageous leaders of this moment. I really feel like the group that gets no respect and deserves all the flowers is grassroots volunteers. And I just, like, election after election, movement after movement, it is organizers and it is volunteers who sacrifice so much, and they get no respect, they get no credit. And one of the many things that drives me crazy of, like, what are the effects of that is not just that sucks. Those volunteers don't even ask for the credit because they're like, I'm doing it because I want to win, I want to see progress, I want to build power to get to that progress. But when I turn on cable news, which I unfortunately do a lot more than is probably healthy, I turn on cable news, and when people are saying, what are people saying on the ground? Panelist after panelist will say, On my way to the studio today, my Uber driver told me, when is the last time that you talked to a voter? When is the last time that you talked to a grassroots organizer? And when is the last time that you talked to a volunteer? And I think, to me, there is one of my favorite pieces of research of the past several election cycles. As the political scientists Josh Calla and David Brockman put out a paper on the effects of direct voter contact, not on motivating a voter to get out to vote or to persuading the voter, but what is the effect of that on the volunteer and on their politics? And what they found was the more that someone goes out and actually talks, looks in the eyes of a voter, talks to that voter, the more their politics are transformed, right? Because when you talk to people, people are weird. People are idiosyncratic. It's one of the beauties of being a human being. We are not like AI. We're not predictable. All of us have strange opinions. And when you go and do politics that is rooted on the ground, then you can lead in a way that is more rooted in what people are actually going through. And I think if we don't start to respect grassroots volunteers, grassroots organizers, and give them, again, the flowers that they deserve, we're going to continue having a politics that is so far disconnected from the ground that it just doesn't make sense to voters.
I think, yeah, I love that, yes. And I think what you're also speaking to is the cultural piece that we have to land in a much stronger way. It's why building our own media platforms and building our own ways to reach people authentically, far too often our side starts at sort of believing and tries to move people to belonging. We want you to believe everything we believe, and then you can belong with us. And we should all know that the places you feel most sort of accepted, and oftentimes places that have actually moved you on issues, is where they start with belonging. That you can belong here, you can engage here, and we move people to believe it. You know, there are these people that will always talk about that, much like progressives, will talk about the issues that they care about. Or they'll talk about the features, right? They'll go on and on about the features, how much their features are better. I like to talk about these people as Android users. And I'm not here, I just talked about corporations, so I'm not here to defend a corporation, but I think we can look at this through the lens of Android users who I actually do believe their cameras are better on an Android. Their cameras are better, they're right? But how many times for Apple users does do the green dot show up and you're like, damn, And I say that to say that that's oftentimes what we do on our side, is that we talk about our features and our issues, and we don't bring people into a belonging of a connection around actually being part of something. And so you can go on and on about how much our issues are better, and then people don't actually feel like they belong, they're connected, they have a home on our side. And so one of the important things for us over this coming is to create as much passion and engagement and belonging around what we're fighting for, and how people can be connected to our side, and how people can feel in community, because we are not going to win on our platform alone. We're not gonna win by, and it's really hard sometimes in spaces where we actually know the issues, where we know that our issues are better, that we know that our camera, I guess, is much better. And why won't people just actually sign up? And so to the extent of, if we want to reach as many people as possible, we have to recognize the role of culture and community in that conversation, and be as focused on actually doing that work as we are on making sure that we have the right issues that can deliver for people. And we have the power and the grassroots energy to actually win those things, to enforce those things, and to actually make sure that we can deliver for people in real ways.
That deserves a little something. At a time when faith in institutions is at an all-time low, the ability for grassroots organizations to have the support they need to receive those people who are looking outside of party politics or major corporations and looking for something more community-based, those resources in those communities need to be there for them. And so, Melissa, I wanted to ask you, because you are very well versed in working outside of the typical system. Could you share a little bit about how it's been like growing those infrastructures and what it means to those people to find the communities that you're able to help them be a part of?
Yeah, absolutely. I deeply believe, especially now, that any path that we have back to support, any organizing path that we have, has to go through meeting head on the frustrations of working people in this country. and responding to their daily needs. And I'll take you on this journey to sort of like how we got here, because we have built now our entire organizing model around that. And it was a year ago this month. I feel like everybody in the world had the same question, from my biggest donors to my favorite bartender. I was just constantly getting the question of what the hell happened with Latino voters, right? The blame that came after the election. And I said it then, and I will say it now, which was that it did not feel, and this was not just like my personal opinion, this was based on the 300,000 conversations that Somos had in just the last 6 weeks of the election last year, that what we were seeing was evidence of a permanent ideological realignment, or at least it didn't have to be. What we were seeing was the response of people who had been so economically suppressed for so long under a system that was not delivering for them, and we were seeing evidence then of that in the shifts that we were seeing. And there's a moment that really highlights this for me that has grown now our economic programs that I'll mention, which was when the first round of economic stimulus checks went out, the Trump checks that had Trump's big fat signature on them. If you did not have a bank account in this country, which a lot of people do not, you got a paper check in the mail with that signature on it. And my dad, Southwest Kansas, blue collar guy, does not have a bank account, so he got one of those paper checks in the mail. And I remember that he called me after he cashed it, and he said, I started shaking as they were counting the money out into my hand, because it's the most money I've ever had in my hand at one time. And at that moment, I thought two things. One, that was real for him, and that was real for a lot of people across this country. They had that exact same moment. And second, the fact that that story is true is absolutely unacceptable. It means that our policies have left people behind so far, to the point that he was shaking at that moment. And that has completely eroded the trust that people have in institution, and completely eroded the trust that people have in our government. And so that's the sort of foundation, like that's the square. It was like, okay, well, we're gonna start at square one then. So this entire year, Somos's program has been meeting, number one, daily economic needs. So that has been, in August, that was thousands of backpacks filled with school supplies. That was gift cards for parents to help with offset school expenses. In November, that was renting out massive refrigerated Penske trucks and passing out thousands of Thanksgiving bags, every bag a full meal. And then we challenged ourselves to go even bigger. It's like we keep asking people to make incremental changes, or to just trust us on incremental changes, when we're asking them to play a game of inches when they're telling us they need a Hail Mary. And so we thought, let's go even bigger, and let's make a point of this. So this past month, Somos bought up and forgave $133 million in medical debt in the state of Nevada. No applications, no red tape. People got, on Thanksgiving week, a letter in the mail that notified them that their medical debt had been erased. And we have been tying that to the fact that that is one thing that we can do, but we should be pushing for policy changes, sweeping policy changes that fix these problems. And states have that power. So we are tying it now to the fact that last state leg session, there was a medical debt bill that got brought to the state legislature, and it passed, and the governor vetoed it. Yep. These are the leaders right now. Boo! No, but these are the leaders, and these are the people that we should be holding accountable. So it is about meeting the needs in the moment, and also never giving up on the larger structural change.
Just quickly, I think one of the things that we've been batting around the office is that we keep talking about the parties. Like there's the political party, the Dems, the Republicans, and I think we need to start thinking about, like, there's one political party and there's one that's more of a religion, and it's giving people purpose. And that is what we are seeing when we are talking to folks, that there is a difference in a political party that's giving you policies, and there's another that is giving you what purpose, which means that we don't fight that with the facts and figures. We fight that with an alternative vision. We fight that with giving a different purpose. We fight that in community. That we fight that and having a different conversation, because this is not something, what Melissa was saying was like, these are folks that are lost because they're making policy decisions, right, on policy pieces. These are people who are searching for something different. And there is another party, not party, in quotes, there is another group of folks that are offering purpose for folks, and we are offering a platform.
I would argue the other side is not a religion. I'd say they're a cult, because I think faith without works is dead, and they don't offer any works. And I just really, I think that what they've done, they are really good liars. They are really good at building trust. And I think they are rooted in institutions that give that purpose, right? Like everything from the NRA clubs to congregations, like our institutions are not as strong as they used to be, whether that's our unions, whether it's the congregations on our side. They are not, this is a moment that I'm really freaked out about, the atomization that we are experiencing as a country, the lack of protection that every American, but folks on our side who are more vulnerable, are experiencing, of like an epidemic of loneliness combined with disinformation and misinformation, and no institutional rootedness is really scary, which is why a cult is appealing. There is a lot of history of cults being very appealing when people are really vulnerable. And I think I love the way that you framed this sort of like, how do we give people purpose and give them faith? And I think that's both like, what is the vision, but also how can they sort of imagine their agency? Like, to me, the best congregations are the ones that give everybody a job, right? It doesn't matter if you just joined the church a minute ago, or it doesn't matter if you've been a leader in the church your whole life. You've got a job. You've got to do the work. And I think we've gotten so technocratic in how we think about stuff that it's like, unless you've got a master's degree in politics, like, you are not invited in to the conversation, rather than this is an all hands on deck moment. Here is not just the purpose, but how each and every one of us needs to find our purpose, which might be different for each one of us.
The thing I'm going to just end with is that this may sound like a downer, but I hope it comes across as an aspirational opportunity for all of us, is that is like water that pours over a floor with holes in it. It will always find the cracks. And sometimes I think that we want to sort of deal with all of these issues, but not actually deal with racism, and it will catch up to us. It catches up to us in election time, when we explain all sorts of ways why people do and don't do certain things. It catches up to us in what types of appeals work from our opponents, what type of structural sort of interventions do and don't work, the ways in which our opponents can profiteer, what travels on the internet and doesn't travel on the internet. And there has been so much work and so much effort to try to figure out, how do we do this without actually having to deal with racism, because it's hard and it hurts. And then it catches us up, and it catches us and it stops us from either actually getting legislation over the line, right? Like Cinema and Mansion, like you don't have to actually understand coded language to understand who they did not want to like get those benefits. Who do they not want each time they block something, and why those appeals worked. And so it is just, if we do not see if we see racial justice and racism as a thing that we do on the side, or the thing we do simply because it's moral, or the thing we do because it's the right thing to do, or we don't want to get in trouble with the black and brown people. If we see it as that, we will keep losing. But if we can find a way to see racial justice as a strategy, as a thing that actually will not only help us win, but sustain our wins, as an evaluative tool at the end of anything that we win, to actually help us determine, did our wins actually add up to the things that were meaningful? Can they be implemented, and can they be enforced? But as long as our opponents know that we're not willing to actually deal with it, to address it, to challenge it head on, whether it's in election time or whether it's in the final throes of trying to get something over the line, they'll keep winning and we'll keep losing. So the opportunity is that it's in front of our face what we have to do to win, and the question is will we do it?
And with that, I am regrettably going to have to wrap up this panel. But thank you all so much for all of these words of wisdom. Yeah, let's get a good round of applause. we're going to experience together an exploration of what media courage looks like under threat and how journalists and creators can protect democracy in practice and inspire action and change. Let's get our next moderator up here. This is Mark Jacob. He is a former and longtime and incredible editor from the Chicago Tribune. He also writes for Courier. He has a Substack that I encourage you all to look at, follow, subscribe, get the emails. It's called Stop the Presses. He'll be moderating and talking about news and politics. You've also authored, what, a dozen books? 10. Well, that's my math degree showing my dozen.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Come on up, guys. Thanks for being here. I want to introduce the panelists. To my left here is Andrea Chalupa. She is a Brooklyn-based journalist, author, writer-producer of the historical film Mr. Jones, which was super, and host of the podcast Gaslit Nation. Next is Meredith Lynch, who is an LA-based writer and content creator who focuses on the intersection of politics and pop culture. She is the co-creator and co-host of The Moment Live, a woman-led news show that streams across social platforms. Next after that is Brian Beutler, founder and publisher of Off Message, a newsletter about politics. He was formerly editor-in-chief of Crooked Media and senior editor at The New Republic. And last, Jack Cocchiarella, who is a progressive political commentator with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And Jack covers daily breaking news and is engaging his audience with cultural issues defining our politics. So, yeah, 1 million subscribers, not too shabby. So I'm going to start with a kind of a jump ball question you can all answer, or just whoever wants to. But here we have kind of broken media. We have a mainstream media that is, I think, is lost to a large extent, and then you have purposeful disinformation further clouding the picture. And so I want to ask you, is there one example of a news outlet or journalist who's cutting through all of this mess to actually deliver truth in these tough, difficult times?
Absolutely, ProPublica.
Yeah. Want to say a little bit more about them?
Well, so nonprofit, worker-owned newsroom. They believe in that whole idea of you can't be neutral in the face of evil. So I've been to some of their fundraisers. I know Jesse Eisinger, the Pulitzer Prize winner, who led their coverage, their investigations into corruption on the Supreme Court. And they're very explicit. Like, their marching orders as a newsroom is moral force,
right.
Moral force. Or CNN and like the big sort of giants, they believe that you can't have ethics, you can't have that moral force, or it makes you partisan.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about them also is that they're completely nonpartisan, but they're still bringing the truth.
It's muckracker journalism.
Right.
It's old-fashioned, traditional.
Right.
Ida Tarbell. Yeah.
Brian?
I would broaden out from ProPublica to include a number of outlets that I guess I would describe as sort of like, they're like in their digital middle age. They either were digital first, starting in the aughts or the 2010s, or they had a print publication in the past, but then went mostly online. So ProPublica is a great example, but Tech Dirt is doing really good stuff. Mother Jones, TPM. And I think what they all have in common is they're independent and they became comfortable doing reporting online early in the internet's sort of takeover of the media.
Meredith?
I have kind of a more, niche answer. I want to give a shout out to my boy Don Lemon. I am a proud lemon head. If you know, you know. But, and it's not just Don Lemon. It's also Don Lemon. It's Jim Acosta. All of these folks who who are not in the traditional media anymore, who are really building their own platform. And one of the things that I'll say about Don, because I've decided we're on a first name basis, the thing that I'll say is he truly loves journalism, and that's like one of the most amazing things that we're seeing with some of these independent people who are going independent is like they have so much more freedom. It's just better journalism.
Yeah, well, I can relate to it too, because when I was Metro editor at the Tribune, there were a lot of things I could not say publicly. And then when I asked for a buyout, got it, and I was liberated, and so suddenly I could, say what I wanted on social media. Jack, do you have any thoughts?
Don's show is also free breakfast if you do his live stream when he's in DC, so I'd say that's a huge plus. I'm surprised no one said Barry Weiss really holding it down. But just because I'm not technically contractually obligated, I'll also shout out, starting a little independent, The Bulwark, doing incredible reporting, expanding their coverage, and much love to my buddy Tim Miller. So if we're
Boo Tim.
Don't boo Tim. Don't boo Tim yet.
I have to say, I have a hard time with the Republican media, the sort of never Trumper media, because it's sort of the Reagan Revolution. Their heroes laid the groundwork for Trump and got us here. I think if they wanted to do a show where they atoned, I would watch that every day.
That would be great. I did want to give a shout out to Courier because they recognized that instead of doing news and waiting for the audience to come to you, that it was very smart to find underreached or unreached people, and with social media, with Facebook, with TikTok, with Instagram, and get to them where they are instead of expecting irrationally for them to get to you. So some individual questions. Meredith, I want to ask you, in a world of rampant income inequality reaching Marie Antoinette levels, all kinds of news are now political news. How has that changed how you cover culture and celebrity news? How does politics kind of seep in there?
Yeah, I mean, I started as a beauty creator. I literally, I did beauty videos.
And it shows.
Thank you. Thank you. I did put in the work. I did learn a lot. But no, and then after the midterms, I started to get more into the intersection of pop culture and the political. And it's like, when I saw Jeff Bezos sitting behind Trump at the inauguration, let's just say there's a reason Lauren Sanchez has me blocked. Yeah. But when you see the intersection of celebrity, because Jeff Bezos is a celebrity, right? Lauren Sanchez is a celebrity now. When you see that intersection happening, these things don't exist in a bubble. The day of the inauguration, Kim Kardashian posted a photo of Melania. I was like, okay, cool, I see you. And unfortunately, a lot of people pay attention to Kim Kardashian. So I have to meet people where they are, and I am not afraid to say hey, let's talk about how, Kim Kardashian was a criminal justice advocate. Anybody remember that? Yeah, until ICE came to town. Now she's quite quiet. So that intersection is a really great way to bring people in.
Andrea, you've covered Kremlin propaganda and disinformation, and we're seeing that kind of style of kind of big government disinformation, just kind of in all portions of our media and our lives. What's the similarities, and what do you think we can do to try to cut through that? In Hungary, for example, when Orban would get his pals to buy up media, and in effect you had media capture, where it was really controlled by the government, even if it wasn't owned by the government. That we're seeing that happen here to some extent, and what do we do about that?
Independent media. So my model for survival in America today is Ukraine's world-famous civil society. The journalists, the anti-corruption reformers, these are groups of people, and it's a generational struggle that has just gotten stronger over time. They've had some of their leaders killed in car bombs, beheaded, and they keep going, they keep building, and they just come back even stronger. And they have such a strong philosophy that we all need to now adapt here in the US, and it's called self-reliance. In Ukraine, self-reliance is everything. You don't depend on the government, you depend on yourselves, you depend on your friends. When you visit the nerve center of Ukraine civil society, it's all the groups of independent media, and then the anti-corruption reformers are down the hall. And they all work together, they all drink together, they all eat lunch together, and it's just what the Ukrainians do in their resistance is they create a giant brain trust, and that's what sustains us. And so what I think is really, really important to understand that when I started in media at Condé Nast Portfolio, we had a fact-checking department, a photo department, a production department, a copy editing department, and you'd had editorial assistants who could book and research your interviews for you. I do all of that myself from my bedroom. I'm a one-woman newsroom. And so in this new sort of shock and awe economic warfare that Trump and Elon Musk have waged against us, with doging us, taking away our very livelihood, our ability to support ourselves, and all this economic crash and anxiety that's growing, and it's all on to us to sustain this in the fight. It's extremely lonely, it's extremely stressful, and so I'm really focused on looking to the Ukrainian model for sustainability. And that is, we have to find each other, we have to reach out to each other, we have to lean on each other, and we have to carry each other. And I promise you, that is the only way through this horrible American individualism of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, be strong, put on a brave face, don't act like you're cracking inside or grieving. It's extremely toxic. Ukrainians, in their revolution of dignity that overthrew the Ukrainian Trump, this total buffoon that loved gold and robbing from the state and enriching his family, Ukrainians came together on the square and they mourned their dead openly. They cried and sobbed openly. They rebuilt from the ashes openly. And so I think that's what we all need to do now is the entire time the four of us were in the green room, it became like an episode of The Office. We were like venting to each other, like, how can I help you? Asking dumb questions. And that's what we need to do. Like, all of us in this room, doesn't matter what your lived experience is, like, we're now a newsroom for justice and accountability.
Yeah, thanks.
Would it throw things off if I tried to find a touch point between these two answers? Because I think it's Andrea will correct me if I'm wrong,
Andrea.
but
I'll correct you. You're wrong, Andrea.
my understanding of how independent media function in prior, like, authoritarian takeovers is that most of them happened before the internet era. So you had small journals that were maybe allowed to persist. They weren't controlled by the state, and the leaders could point to them and be like, "Look, we have a free press. It's these tiny journals that nobody subscribes to." I think one of the small silver linings about the new digital media age is that every independent journalist or content creator can be a writer and a video producer and a audio producer, and we can exploit algorithms to make sort of salacious things go viral. And so, to the point about inequality, what we're seeing happen now, where you have an administration that's authoritarian, but it's also cutting health care so that they can take the savings and give it to rich people for tax cuts, while also hosting Gatsby parties and building a palace ballroom where the White House used to be. You could sort of live stream the new Gilded Age, and that will reach people. People will understand that this dichotomy between taking food out of the mouths of babies and building ballrooms for the president to have corruption parties in, like, that kind of independent media will be seen by a lot more people than the independent media of the past in repressive societies.
Yeah, great point.
And the audiences know it. You asked me in the green room, like, what's that relationship like with the audience? How do you grow it? They understand what this project of independent media is, as well as the rest of us. They understand the need for creators to grow, to be able to sustain themselves, to interact with each other, why that's so important. I see a lot of the times when I'm able to land more high-profile interviews, a lot of the comments are about saying, it's fantastic that these elected officials are finally starting to realize what people who have been watching independent media for so long have known, which is this is the lifeblood. Like, this is what we need. And so that engagement with the audience is probably clearer than it's ever been. And I think a lot of creators feel a lot more comfortable asking for support, needing it, and saying it, and making it clear, and saying that we need to be coming together in a greater way to make this project work.
So, Jack, I suspect you're the only member of this panel who was born in this century. So
a little bit, yeah.
He's still taller than me, though, and I don't
just
really
barely
appreciate it.
So I want to ask, you're not imprisoned by this kind of legacy mentality that I was, but I think some things may be lost when you have this kind of this wild west of people in independent media. But so I actually just wanted your view on whether what's happening in independent media with YouTube, with podcasts, with Substack, the whole thing, whether that's a sustainable way to deliver news for the future, or whether that's just kind of a interim stage between the old legacy news and something we don't know that's going to happen next.
I think people, now that we have such an ability to kind of get rid of the gatekeepers, will always want to interact with their people. And I think that more so than institutions, But then you see the kind of, not that I want to give him any credit in this moment, but like Dave Portnoy of a Barstool Sports built out a media apparatus around what it meant to be Dave Portnoy. Bill Simmons did this with The Ringer. You have people who are the kind of essence of what their media company is. And so in that way, the individual can build something bigger. But I think people are going to want to go to their people more and more now that they have this opportunity. So I do think it's sustainable. Hopefully someone can help you with a little bit more of the R&D of going forward. I know what it's like to be the one-person operation. But I think that that's going to be happening more and more. So I always do think that going forward, now that we have this ability to kind of go straight to the source, that it's going to be more prevalent. And as long as we are still comfortable getting 4 hours of sleep, then yes, it will be sustainable. But until that point, which won't be coming soon, then yes.
Yeah, well, Brian, I wanted to ask a similar question for you because you have been in various roles with various sized news outlets, and now you're doing a newsletter by yourself, right?
Yes.
And is that sustainable for you and for other people like you? And just how do you think that contributes to the whole news ecosystem, or is it just? I mean, is again the same question is this an interim stage or is this something that can last?
So it was definitely like a lifeboat for me, and then I sailed it to wherever, and I kind of used my subscribership as a moat, and I can wait out whatever's happening in sort of more traditional media from that safe location, right? So I'm doing okay. I think I would like distinguish between 3 things, like how will Brian Beutler do? How will Substack, where my newsletter is housed, do? And then is this something like the newsletter economy can grow into something that supplants the old media economy? I think I will be fine. I don't know about Substack, right? Like Substack could be bought by Elon Musk and ruined quickly, right? I have no way of knowing. So things that are sort of on my mind are like, how can I make myself more independent still? Should I have my eye on other newsletter companies, or should I create my own sort of gated thing that I run, and every time it crashes, that's on me, but at least it's mine, and it doesn't, Elon Musk will never come to hostile take over my newsletter. To the question of whether what's happening in my space can ever really take over what's kind of collapsing in the background, it's maybe because, outlets like The Bulwark show that you can kind of recreate magazines and newspapers in the more personalized space of newsletters, and that means you can maybe finance things like investigative reporting, which are very hard to do as a sole proprietor. I know 1 or 2 that Radley Balco writes a really good newsletter that's investigative journalism. Marissa Kabas does too, called The Handbasket. But it's really hard to attract subscribers and then say, hey, you got to bear with me for a couple weeks while I report out this really important story. Right. And you're not going to get anything over that period of time. So the economics of the newsletter industry make that kind of journalism really hard. And it's just hard for me to see how you end up with the amount of resources that were once poured into that kind of reporting being equaled on the newsletter side of things.
And I want to say that kind of reporting needs lawyers and legal insurance and fact checkers and sleep.
And copy editors, yes. I worry that sometimes, I write an independent newsletter myself, although I have a good editor at Courier. But I do think that, having been in the daily newspaper business for four decades, I liked it when people would tell me that I was totally wrong and should not do this. They talk me out of my bad ideas. And I do worry that with this independent trend that nobody's talking people out of their bad ideas, but maybe the audience is. What do you think? Jack's shaking his head.
They encourage it. Go back and watch my day 1 coverage of Charlie Kirk, and they encourage it. Wow, that didn't get enough laughs. So no, I'm in trouble now. If the iPad ladies can have as much fun, so can I. Come on, that's unfair. We love you, Jennifer. But no, I don't want to say they always encourage it, but I don't know what sometimes you break up investigative reporting versus giving takes on YouTube. Sometimes there's a different idea of what a bad idea is, but that's something that you do kind of work through with the audience. There is a lot of comments. Sometimes some are more easy to read than others. but it is the relationship with the audience to see what they want from you or what they don't, in terms of how much fun you can have sometimes, how angry you can be sometimes, how real you can be sometimes, but as long as you're communicating it, I think there's that level of trust there that's established.
Were they saying it was a bad idea for you because it would be unpredictable or because of audience capture? What bad ideas are you trying to suss out?
Well, I was being more general about it, but I guess I was talking about an article that nobody cares about. You know, that you put a lot of resources in and nobody cares about, which happens in daily newspapering.
Yeah, so one thing that I definitely noticed having moved from, I've always worked in independent media, but then going solo and doing it on an outlet like Substack where, you know, you want your work to be rewarded with people deciding to become paying subscribers. And if you put a lot of work into something that's really high quality and it doesn't do the job, it maybe you lose money on it because nobody becomes a paid subscriber, but meanwhile, just through attrition, other people drop off. Then you think to yourself, shouldn't I just be sort of feeding my audience more red meat? And that might be more effective at making more money. And you really just have to have the mental habits to not give into that, at least beyond the point of having a sustainable business model, right? And I do see like a dichotomy on Substack between people who came up as journalists and people who are using Substack as another platform in their influencer careers. Because it's really hard to become an influencer if you came up through journalism, right? Like you're trained to choose your words super carefully, and you know, not sort of pop off. Just be very precise about everything that you put out in the world, because if you make a mistake, you could be sued. You got to correct it, etc. And influencers, that's not what they do, right? And now these worlds are sort of colliding. And, you know, where news consumers used to have to develop a certain set of media consumption habits, they're probably going to have to learn to distinguish between people who make content for a living as journalists who've gone independent and people who make content for a living because they're influencers or they're selling a product or whatever else.
Right.
And it's not always clear.
I want to jump in there. So what you're bringing up is media literacy. And there's a phenomenal organization called MAD, because we're all mad, and it's the Media and Democracy Project. And what they have weekly events, weekly meetups, and all sorts of resources on how to media literacy, how the media works, and how to hold it accountable. So check out MAD. Yeah,
I'm an ally of theirs too. Meredith, I wanted to ask you this question first, since you're from Los Angeles. I thought, with the time left, I wanted to talk about the Warner Brothers, Netflix, Paramount thing and see what you guys thought about that. So Meredith, go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, it's very concerning, right? I mean, Hollywood has already been through so much, and the idea of this, another merger is terrifying. And of course, now what's being thrown around is like, don't worry, I'll turn CNN into Fox News. And I think that's incredibly concerning. And I just think, just to the point that we were bringing up before about, can mainstream media keep up? And it's like, well, I don't want to watch a town hall of Erica Kirk. And, right? I'm sorry, healthcare, there's so many, the economy, there's so many other things, but there is an audience for that. There are people who want to see that. So there are people who want CNN to look like Fox News, because that's, and that's who watches TV too. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's who's consuming a lot of actual television. But, I think it is incredibly concerning. And what will come out of it, though? Will more independent creators come out of it, or are we all just going to start to have complete mistrust? Because that's the other thing. I also find that there's becoming mistrust in journalists who are now independent. They're dealing with that same mistrust. They're getting lumped into mainstream media, which has become a buzzword. But yeah, it's very concerning. LA's already expensive.
I feel like watching this has made me realize how living in a more corrupt society kind of affects the way we think about everything. Because I think if this was happening a year or two ago, I would be very gung-ho about the idea that this merger should be blocked, right? Lena Khan should just go get their ass, and no merger between Netflix and Time Warner, right? But now it's do we deal with Netflix, Time Warner, and how it's going to make shows shittier, and movie theaters are going to close down, and we're all going to be worse off as consumers as a result of it, but at least it won't be super corrupt. Or let Paramount do the hostile takeover, and now it's just yet another arm of the Trump right-wing media behemoth. And so now I'm kind of like, okay, I'll take the salad with the crushed glass in it, and I'll eat that because that sounds better than the alternative. And so for that reason, like I have not actually, I've not written really about it. And if like, gun to the head, I would say just let the Netflix thing happen. But it's only because I know what's waiting in the wings.
Right.
If it doesn't.
Right. Any other thoughts?
It's the dumbing down of America.
Yeah.
Well, why is it? Why do you say
So that they vote against their own interests and they have an enslaved mentality.
Yeah. But why would a sale to the Ellison family be the dumbing down of America? I mean,
They want to.
I have my own answer.
They want to make Toby Keith biopics.
You're not excited about Rush Hour 4?
Actually, I sort of like Rush Hour. I'm kind of a Rush Hour apologist, I've realized.
Pro Rush Hour?
Yeah, I'm a little pro Rush Hour.
Well, okay, I'll just put it to you this way. As a filmmaker, I have to work in Europe because I can't get my films off the ground here, not in a million years. An example of that is like all the Russian money and now all the Saudi money that's flooding into Hollywood, flooding into entertainment. I'm going to go old school. The Steele report showed how Putin had his eye on the Russian oligarch kids who are now in America. What are they doing? They're all filmmakers laundering Russian money through Hollywood. A prime example of this is that Cold War volleyball movie, Top Gun, right? The sequel just came out with Tom Cruise. The villain historically is Russia. In the sequel is like some obscure country. Was it Bulgaria? And the reason why is because one of the investors was a top Russian oligarch who way overpaid for one of Trump's mansions in Florida. So yeah, it's more censorship and more dumbing down of America to make America Russia.
Right.
There's so few electeds talking about this, I feel. Just because they're afraid to slip up or say it too early or say it too angrily or whatever it may be. Saw a great headline the other day. It was like, Americans hate data centers, when will Democrats? And this is a thing to just talk about. And the corruption is so rampant, you feel like if you're not making a week out of it, then what's the point? Sometimes the one elected Democrat who I think has done a great job just doing straight to camera, Chris Murphy, will talk about every instance of corruption, whether it's a Trump pardon or Don Jr. with his masterful self starting a drone company or glomming onto a drone company. And it hasn't just made us dumber. Why do we have to concern ourselves with this? Like, why is this our reality in which we have to worry about who Donald Trump is helping purchase what to feed you what you don't want, and Netflix is bad, and the angles are sloppy, and the music is AI, and we should just be upset about these things. And we should want people who are just upset about these things. And again, I think that's why, to bring back to a little bit of what it's all about, like why people just kind of want to go to independent creators who are happy to say that. Because there doesn't necessarily need to be a point besides why. Why is this what we're being fed? Why is this what we have to deal with? And that's an okay feeling to have without necessarily knowing why. I feel like the right has done such a great job. Damn it, why am I praising them? But like just taking feelings and making that be the thing that we talk about. And it's really easy for everyone to talk about a feeling. And Donald Trump himself has become that feeling of, oh, I'm disaffected, oh, they are after me, whoever that might be, and they are actually after us right now, what we consume when we come home and just sit down and want to relax. Now that's being controlled by Larry Ellison. Who wants that? And then he wants to track all your data, and so that doesn't need to be a finer policy point. I think you can just say that sometimes. And it's really disappointing we haven't seen more people do just that.
Well, yeah, actually, you get to the point that I talk about a lot, which is that I don't think that mainstream media gets mad about anything.
No.
And I don't mean emotionally as much as there's no sense of outrage. I mean, the idea that you would have the President of the United States deciding who's going to own a news network or would decide what late-night comedy show is going to be canceled, it's unthinkable 10 years ago. So why are we accepting it today? And I just feel like there ought to be more outrage even in mainstream media, but certainly I think it's healthy, as Jack, as you've been pointing out.
More humanity.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, everyone ought to get mad. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. And we've run out of time, and I'm mad about that. But thank you so
Everyone
much.
to watch Network.
Yeah, right. You're,
Thank you.
good job. Thanks so much.